Welcome to the Elliot Jolesch Hour. Elliot is the business therapist, giving you access to the greatest business minds in the world. Elliot and his sources provide insight to help your business maintain a healthy life. It's therapy for your business, and it starts now. Here's Elliot Jolesch.
And it's just I've got a bright sunshiny day. It's in the mid 60s right now here in Frisco, Texas, and I want to welcome everybody again to the show. I am Elliot Jolesch, the business therapist. Please check me out at my website at ecjgroup.com, and by all means, drop me an email. Send me a question or anything at questions@ecjgroup.com, and we'll help answer them. You'll get a direct reply or possibly even talk about it on the air here in a future show. Well, what are we going to talk about today? There are 44 days left in this year. Hard to believe, isn't it? And we already know that at least 2 of those days, basically, you're not going to work. That's Thanksgiving Day and Christmas Day. At least potentially you're not going to work, though a lot of people never quit working to make a success of their business. So with 44 days left in the year, what should you be doing? And how do you get ready for 2016? That's going to be some of our discussion for the rest of this show. And it's something that I've talked about all the time. Every show, I always try to bring up the idea behind understanding what your numbers are, making sure you have well-established goals, written goals, so that you know where you're headed, so that you have a direction. I also like to remind people that when and I'll give you a perfect example. When you're driving in the car, what do? Do you look in the rear view mirror, or do you look out the front window to see where you're going? The obvious answer, of course, is you're going to look in the front window. The rear view mirror is a little bitty to see where you've been. The front window or windshield is huge, so you see what you're heading into. And it's always important to remember that. Now, it's always important, too, to look behind you to make sure that you don't make some of the same mistakes that you might have made as you move along. You don't want to repeat those mistakes. But it's very important that you make a mistake, you figure out what went wrong, and you move forward. And do not try to repeat it. Doesn't mean you won't, or doesn't mean that you have you do a course correction and maybe it's the wrong course. Maybe you figure out after you've gotten so far down the road that this is not the right direction. I need to go back and refigure this out. That's why I say it's very important when you decide on your goals that they line up with your vision and your mission. It's extremely important that they line up with your vision and your mission. And I always tell people and my clients that it's a good time, the end of the year, December, things tend to quiet down on some businesses, and other businesses, they get very busy. I was with a client this past week that his busiest season is right now. And for the next 3 weeks, he'll be slammed in some way, manner of speaking, with events going on all across the country, and then processes that have to be challenged. And then somewhere along the line, we have to go back and we'll sit down and review over what's happened over the last about 90 days for him, and then analyze that and determine if the jobs that he has done were profitable. And that's the only way you can move forward, is by looking at your numbers, analyzing them, and determine, is this something the right thing I'm going to do? And am I moving forward in the right direction? In his particular case, he has events or jobs, whichever way you want to look at it, that we can isolate so that we can control what sales are coming from it, what expenses were involved with it, what cost of goods and materials are involved with it. And from that, he can determine, did I make money on this job or not? Is this a job I should accept in the future if it comes up again? Some of the jobs he does are repeating jobs. Others are not. They're one-timers. It also helps him establish some estimates for looking at new jobs to determine, are they valuable enough to do, even if the first year I do them, I'm not going to make any money. So is this a repeat job? Is it a job that I can go in and get a contract to repeat it for 3 or 5 years or X number of years? And how long will it take me to turn a profit? Can I turn a profit the first year, which is a bonus? Or will it take 2 or 3 years, and what's my cost going to be? Can I break even? So I don't have a profit, but at least I'm breaking even, so I'm not going in the hole on this particular job. Those are all things you have to analyze when you're doing, in a sense, job cost accounting is what we call it from an accounting standpoint. A little bit about my background. I do have an undergraduate degree in accounting. I haven't used it as a straight accounting standpoint. I have used it from the fact that I've owned 3 businesses in my lifetime. On the other hand, I also spent 35 years in IT, so I have a technology background as well. And I've had a coaching practice for the last 4.5 years, almost 5 years now, 4.5 years. And in this, and it's interesting how things have all kind of melded together. So everything that I've involved with, my accounting practice, my technology, all have been involved in my coaching practices now. And that a lot of things that I see that were involved in those areas have rolled over and have allowed me to present that information to my coaching clients. And again, let me stress the idea of a coach. A coach is there to help you. A coach is there is to provide you ideas, to create a sounding board, become an accountability partner so that you can move forward on your company. I remind people constantly that the real goal is to work on the business, not in the business. Working in the business is your day-to-day stuff. If you're a sole entrepreneur and you're it, then you've got to make time to work on the business. In other words, i.e., grow the business, make it larger, if that's your intention. I also always say when you're looking at your goals, I said don't shortchange yourself. Figure out what your goal for this next year is. Let's look at 2016. As I said, there's 44 days left in the year. And and that's based on, of course, Dallas time right now, which is where Frisco is a suburb right outside of Dallas. But when you're looking at your goals for 2016 or for any year, I always tell people, figure out what your bare minimum is. What do you have to survive, to keep your business moving forward? Now, once you have that should not be your goal. Your goal has to be some number higher than that. And the more challenging you make it, the better. Now, again, we deal with SMART goals, so it's got to be very specific. It's got to make sense. It's got to be measurable. And you've got to be able to see, and you have to have a timetable for results, i.e. now the timetable is 2016. You've got to be able to look at key performance indicators that will allow you to analyze whether it be day-to-day, weekly, monthly. All of that has to be figured out and should be as you move forward. So January 1st, as I say, 44 days away. I'm going to suggest that by the end of November, which is about 2 weeks, you should have at least a rough draft of what your goals for 2016 are going to be and what it will take to accomplish those goals. How many clients do you have to sign up? How many widgets do you have to sell? Those are all very important pieces that have to be answered in that puzzle because you have to have some measuring tools. You have to have some pieces in your hands and on your plate, you might say, as to how you're going to get there. Without that information, it's very hard to do any type of course corrections. You're kind of floundering about, and you're not focused on the goal, which is to make the numbers that you're trying to attain. By analyzing your key performance indicators on a regular basis, as I said, whether it be daily, weekly, monthly, or quarterly, those numbers will allow you to do course corrections as you move forward, which is very important to do, so that after 2 weeks or 3 weeks in a month, you're not making the numbers you expect. You need to go back and analyze, what am I doing wrong? And a lot of times when I'm working with clients, it can be a problem of not having an appropriate niche. It's not being focused on the right who your customer is. I'll ask some people, who's your customer? And they say, well, everybody. Well, that's not really the case. You've got to have very specific understanding of who your ideal customer is, who is going to look at your product or your offering and say, I need it. I got to have it. And then one of the things is, why, if you're selling widgets, why is your widget better than somebody else's widget? If you're selling coffee, why is your coffee better than the coffee place down the road? And, it's one of, you've got to have that understanding, because if you don't have that understanding, you're going to be harder pressed to be able to sell your product. And of course, all sales are based on relationships. You have a good, high quality product and people like you, and you're not just in there for the sale, you'll be successful. It's got to work that way. There are some things that, you can go out that are commodity items that if you sell, and people are going to look at it only from a pricing standpoint, but that's not, normally you're not going to get a lot of money out of that. That's not going to be your bread and butter if you're selling widgets. That may help make your numbers for your baseline, your low man, your lowest amount of money that you're looking for, but it's not going to help you increase your business. It's not going to help you set your goals. So as we continue talking here the rest of the show, we're going to talk a little bit about goals. We'll talk about some marketing. We're going to talk about areas that all need to be evaluated, particularly now as we get near the end of the year. It's very important that I find that a business review this, I personally think, on an ongoing basis, at least every quarter. But we'll talk about that more as we come back. You're listening to the Elliot Jolesch Hour. I am Elliot Jolesch, the business therapist, and we're on OMTimes Radio. We'll be right back after these messages.
You're listening to OTR-FM, part of the IOM radio network.
Are you trying to get from point A to point B and need a little advice? Connect with the counselors at OMTimes Advisors. Whether you're looking for a life coach or a spiritual intuitive, the advisors participating at advisors.omtimes.com were carefully chosen based on their gifts, skills, and professionalism. OMTimes Advisors, connecting you with the best advisors in the business. Join Elliot Jolesch, the business therapist, each Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern for the Elliot Jolesch Hour, as he interviews business experts on your behalf. And you're invited to email your business questions to questions@ecjgroup.com for answers, live, on air every Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern on the Elliot Jolesch Hour.
Hello, I'm Miriam Knight of New Consciousness Review, inviting you to my new show where I interview the rising stars of the conscious awakening. We'll explore the many faces of consciousness in action and intriguing perspectives on life, the universe, and everything in between. Join us each Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern on the Rising Stars Show.
Host your show on IOM FM, the radio network of OMTimes Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of OMTimes. Hosting a show on IOM FM immediately connects you with our extensive dedicated community.
This is OTR-FM, part of the IOM radio network.
Do for goals and how do we get ready for next year? We have 44 days in the year, as I mentioned earlier on. And I wanted to talk a little bit more about, and then we'll put this aside and talk about a little bit more about marketing, but I wanted to go back and kind of recap what we had talked about in the first quarter of the hour here. The importance of setting very smart goals to understand what's your mission and vision. Now, a lot of this can lead up to some type of strategic plan, but I don't think a small business necessarily needs a strategic plan, depending on how long they've been in business. If you've been in business less than 5 years, I'm not sure a strategic plan is required as much as just a standard business plan with some very succinct goals. Ideally, you want a goal for 2016, but I'd also have a goal for 2020. Where do you plan to be in 4 years from now? It's not that far away. You know what? And then where do you plan to be 10 years from now? Let's look out there and set that big picture. Do you want to have multiple locations? Are you going to have a sales force of 50 or 60 people? These are all things that you at least have to have an understanding of. I always ask a client when I start working with them, what's your exit strategy? Now, some people think of that as, well, why are you wanting to know where I want to be with the business? And that's exactly, what is your long-term intention? Is this a business that you tend to hand down to your children? Is it a business that you want to build up and then sell to somebody else? Or is this something you're satisfied doing until you're ready to quit, and then you'll close the doors and walk away? Those are all important questions. And when I've talked to clients, particularly small business owners that have had family-run organizations, that seems to be one of those missing gaps. That's one of those areas that nobody has ever thought about. You know, the grandfather, even maybe the father started the business 30, 40, 50 years ago with the intention of passing it to their kids. And maybe the first generation will take it either because they are very interested in it or because it's expected of them and they follow through. And then maybe the second generation is not quite as excited about the business because they weren't involved with it from the very beginning. Or they look at it as something that they're being forced to do, so they're not ecstatic about it, and they may not want any part of it. Then the question is, do you bring in outsiders to run your business? Do you sell the business outright? There are all sorts of questions that have to be looked at. So that's why I always like to ask what your exit strategy is. I don't want anybody to misunderstand me when I ask that. It's because your exit strategy, it does not have to be written in stone. It can change. You can decide that I want to hand this down to my kids, and in 25 years, I'll do that, or 30 years or whatever. And I'm assuming now you have kids. What if you're not married and don't have kids yet? And what if 30 years from now you either didn't get married or you got married and decided not to have kids or something else? So those are all issues. All of this is kind of pliable. It can be, but it helps you set your directions as to understanding what you want to do with the business. If your long-term intention is to grow the business, then let's set a date. I want to grow the business and I want to sell the business by January 1st, 2025. So now that's basically 9 years out, 10 years out. Now I have some ideas of where I want to be. How large do I want to get that business before I can sell it? What's going to make it valuable? Is my client base going to be the attracting factor, or the widgets I've developed and specialized in? Is that going to be an idea that will eventually come to pass? We also have to look and say, will what I need still be around in 10 years? Do I have a product that is going to last for 10 years from a standpoint of consumer wants and needs for that matter? So those are all issues. But again, for a small company, I'm going to say, less than 25 employees, maybe even less than 50. Those are some of the things that you need to have kind of sit down and figure out what you need. But other than that, your real issue is, what are my goals? What are my individual goals for next year? Do my employees have goals? If I have employees, if I'm a sole entrepreneur, what happens to me if something happens to me, what happens to my business? If I get sick and I can't work, is there some way to keep the business running, or is it shut down? And what does that do to my family from a earning standpoint or from a support standpoint? If you're the sole support for your business and you have no insurance, or you do have insurance and it's not enough. I've talked to clients with both situations. We live in a world these days that things just happen overnight and change drastically. Look at, unfortunately, the events that happened in Paris over the weekend. A sad thing. But still, it changed. It will have changed. Well, it's changed everybody's life, but it's certainly for the people that were involved directly in it, that were injured or lost their lives. Their lives have changed forever, or their families' lives have changed forever. And if they have their own business, that could affect the business. Those are all things that need to be looked at, documented, figured out what to do. I always suggest, if you've got more than one person involved in a business, that there be some type of key man insurance involved. But those are all things that should be talked about with an insurance specialist. I'm not that. Don't try to be. I'll point out things where you need that. That's why I say there are several people you need to have kind of on your payroll, even if only in a contractual method. A good insurance person is that. A good accountant or CPA, somebody to help you prepare your taxes and stuff. Whether you need an in-house CPA or accountant, it depends on a couple of issues: how many employees you already have, how large your business is, and are you paying less by hiring it out than you are by doing it yourself? What is your time worth? I always suggest to people to sit down and calculate, when they sell a product, what's their time worth? And anything that can be done for less money should be hired out, i.e. marketing or accounting, design work, any of that nature, is something that should be hired out. So it's very important that this is a perfect time, the next 44 days, for you to go back and sit back and figure out, am I doing the right thing? Where do I need to make changes? What has worked for this past year? What has not worked? If I have not met my goals, what can I do for the next 44 days to help make my goals? If I have made my goals and I just barely made them and I've still got 44 days, great. If I made my goals 3 months ago, then my question to you is, maybe your goals weren't high enough. Maybe you weren't reaching for the stars quite yet. One of the very important things I look at when talking about goals is again, as I said, we go through your mission and your vision. And I always say, what is the important thing about your product that makes your product special or better than anybody else of the same type of product? What are the selling factors? What are the points that makes you a better client or vendor for your clients? And if you can't answer those questions, then you've got to sit down and look at them again and figure out, what are those selling points that make you unique? One of the things I always that astonishes me when I go to network meetings, and I attend a fair amount of networking meetings to try to help people and also learn from the networking meetings. But it's always interesting because people get to stand up and they introduce themselves and they tell you they explain what they do. In the U.S. here, it's called an elevator speech. You get about 30 seconds. And in 30 seconds, the whole key is for you to be able to explain who you are, what you do, maybe what you're looking for, your ideal client, and how to reach you, how to connect with you. And I am surprised over and over again at the number of times that I'll go into a meeting where I do not hear the same message over and over and over again. You should have a well thought out, well-designed elevator speech that you've practiced, that you've memorized, that you could say in your sleep. Okay? It's that important. So that when you go into a meeting, when you meet somebody on the elevator, you've met somebody on the elevator that you haven't seen, that you knew, and you haven't seen them in 5 years. Okay? We'll call him John. And you and John get to talking, and John says, "Hey, Tom, what do you do? How's things going?" Well, now you've got about 30 seconds to the right of the elevator, approximately, to explain to him what you're doing and how maybe he can help you or you could help him. Can you do it? Do you have it set up well enough automatically in your mind that the minute he says, "What are you doing now, Tom?" that you can click in that elevator speech right away? That's what has to be done. That's a common marketing mistake that I hear all the time, that people just don't have that well thought out. Whether you use a gimmick or not. Now, do you use the same thing for everyone? Generally, rule of thumb is yes. You don't want to have to learn more than one thing. You want to be able to deliver the same message over and over and over again, especially because people that you know and that you'll meet at networking meetings will probably be at other networking meetings. I see occasionally at certain events that one type of message will work better than another type of message, and that's allowable. At least, I mean, if it works, that's great. When we come back from break here in a couple of minutes, I'll talk about an article I saw in Entrepreneur Magazine. Actually, I take it back. It wasn't in the magazine. It was on the website. And I highly recommend entrepreneur.com. If you're not familiar with it, you certainly should be. There is lots of useful information out there. I look at it regularly, and I pull stuff off of it, and it goes kind of in my little folder of things to follow up on. A lot of it comes across as tips and hints that I am familiar with already, and they sometimes say it in a better way than what I thought about, and I will use that to my advantage. That information is out there. The elevator speech is not it's not a new thing. It's been out there for years. It's just amazing to me that even though people know about it, they don't do it. I'm guilty of it occasionally too. They get flustered maybe easily. They haven't practiced it well enough. They just don't. They haven't thought through it yet, and it takes practice. You have to write it out. I tell people to write it out and read it out loud. Maybe record it and hear it and play it back. You want to keep it to 30 seconds. In some places, that's all you get. And ideally, you may even want to keep it down to 27 or 28 seconds so you have a chance to breathe. So we'll continue this discussion. You're listening to the Elliot Jolesch Hour. I am Elliot Jolesch, the business therapist, and we'll be right back after these messages.
This is OTR-FM, part of the IOM radio network.
Have you ever wondered how to change your love paradigm? The secret key is finding a love partnership, not just a regular connection. How do you find these? Through conscious relationships. Ascending Hearts Dating is a dating site for people like you that believes in second chances and a different type of spiritual connection. Try Ascending Hearts for free today at ascendinghearts.com and change your love paradigm. Ascending Hearts, the premier dating community for the spiritually awake.
The name is Bond. James Bond.
No, the name is Joe, The Joe Show. And we are returning back for our 9th season here on OMTimes Radio. So tune in every Wednesday night, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, on OMTimes.com/mobile. You can take us wherever you go. Yeah!
This is Terry Van Horn, and I want to invite you to join me for my weekly radio show, Hailing Light, on OMTimes Radio, every Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. On Hailing Light, we want to bring love, light, and blessings into your world. You can find out more about us at www.healinglightonline.com. Blessings.
Being a radio host on IOM FM allows you to build your show on a rich platform with the power of the internet to fulfill your outreach goals and connect with a very specialized and global online audience, unlimited by time and distance. OMTimes Radio will provide you with web relevance, a recognizable conscious brand, and with the standard of excellence that has accompanied every single OMTimes endeavor. Host your show with OMTimes Radio Network.
You're listening to OTR-FM, part of the IOM radio network.
Welcome back. This is Elliot Jolesch. You're listening to the Elliot Jolesch Hour. I am the business therapist, and we're on OMTimes Radio. So let's continue our discussion. As we talked about at the beginning of the hour, there's 44 days left in this year. And what should you be doing for the next 44 days? As we talked earlier on, let's review goals. Let's go back and see what our goals are for this year. Have we made them? Have we not made them? Can we make them in 44 days if we haven't? What needs to be done? It's time to pull out all the stops, you might say, and move forward. And then moving along to next year's goals, what do we need to do to look at our vision, our mission? Is it on tune to what we expect it to be? Do we need to adjust it? These are all things that we need to look at in order to prepare for 2016. Now, 44 days, as you may say, seems to be a long time, but it really isn't. I mean, Thanksgiving is a week from Thursday, and then we're a week later into December already, and before you know it, you'll be at the end of the year. So you've got to lay these plans out. You've got to sit down and take the time to go in. It's a great time to pull your books out if you haven't already and look at them and kind of get them on track so that you figure out what's your tax consequences before your end of the year. But the other thing I always like to tell people, and it's one of the areas that I've found has had a lot of issues with, is the difference between strategic and tactical marketing. I talk to a lot of clients, and even in networking meetings, I talk to people, and sometimes they have terrific tactical plans, but they've never done any strategic marketing. Now you're saying, well, wait a minute, what's the difference between tactical marketing and strategic marketing? Tactical marketing is basically the nuts and bolts, is the getting the information out to your clients, to your prospects, to your prospective clients. Strategic marketing is figuring out who they are and how do you get to them. So a perfect example is which is a better solution for you. If you're a salesman, you create outdoor screen porches, you sell the products to make outdoor screen porches. Is it better to advertise to 100,000 people, like the size of the Rose Bowl, who may or may not be interested in a screen porch right now, or to 1,000 people, and which is who already say, yes, we're interested in a screen porch, and now that you've got their focused attention, you can lay out why yours is better than anybody else's. So that's the real difference in understanding it. And the first question is, well, how do I figure out who my ideal client is? And that's a question you have to answer yourself. You have to go in and figure out, based on your vision and your mission and your goals, who's my ideal client? What am I looking for? Now, once I have that identified, my perfect client, how do I find them? Where do I go? I mean, are there websites out there that I can look at? Is there a place I can advertise that people will see it? Do I put a massive billboard up on the street and people drive by and will see it, and that will call me? They'll call me. And is my business local? Is it regional? Maybe metropolitan or statewide, countrywide, international? With the internet and a lot of things now, your businesses can be anywhere. I have clients not all over the country, but I've had a client in San Diego. I've got a client currently in Scottsdale. I've had clients elsewhere too. It's not hard to pick up clients anywhere, depending on the type of business you do. So the real key there is how do I get to those clients? And then how do I find my ideal client? Now, not even if you can't find your ideal client, you have to identify your ideal client. You must. You may end up with clients that don't fit into that mold, but that's okay. And as you move along, you may decide I may need to redefine my ideal client. From a coaching standpoint, a lot of times my ideal client is somebody that's been in business 3 to 5 years. They're making anywhere, depending on the size of their business, from $250,000 to $1 million. If they're a sole entrepreneur, or if they might even make only $100,000 or $150,000. That's an acceptable piece for me, provided they meet some other criteria that I look at. If they're a company with 5 or 10 employees and they're making $1 million, that's an ideal client for me from the standpoint is, where do they want to go from there? Because I remind people that if you're making $100,000 and you want to go to $250,000 or $500,000, you have to change your processes. $100,000 process will not get you to $500,000 in most cases. If you're making $500,000 and you want to go to $1 million, you've got to change your processes. They have to be redesigned to develop that larger. The biggest problem I run into with small business owners well, more than one, but the really big problem is sometimes they can't get out of their own way. And the real second problem is they can't let go. They don't trust enough. They don't have the feelings to delegate enough. They have to do everything themselves. And that will stunt your growth. That will make it very difficult to grow larger. But let's step back a little bit. I mentioned just before the break that entrepreneur.com, that I'd gotten that there was an article out there that I found very useful. It's called the 3-part elevator pitch formula you need to know. And it caught my attention because I'm a big believer in elevator speeches. They work. They do. They will grab a person's attention. They will get you past sometimes the guard keeper to get to the right people. But particularly in a networking meeting or when you're on the street and you run into somebody that you haven't seen in a while, having a very distinct, very well spoken elevator speech will get their attention. If you're at a cocktail party or something, and we've got, it's Christmas time, you're going to have parties, the holiday time that's coming up. I'm sure there'll be that you're attending a party somewhere, and the question will come up, Tom, what do you do? Or John, or whoever, what do you do? And your ability right then and there to basically lay out what you do, why you do it, and how you do it is immense. So I'm going to kind of break down this article. I'm just going to kind of give you the high points of it. Feel free to look at entrepreneur.com and find the article. Again, the title of the article is the 3-part elevator pitch formula you need to know, and the author is Robert W. Bly. He wrote the article. And he has a book out called The Marketing Plan Handbook, which sounds like a great book. I have not seen the book yet. It's on my want to read list. But it will probably be a book in next year because right now I have about 5 other books that are on my want to read list too. That's another story we'll get into someday about what books do I follow up on and how do you find books to read? Because you have to always be learning. You have to always open yourself to new stuff. So in the 3-part formula for the elevator, the first part is ask a question beginning with the words, do you know, that identifies the pain or need that your product or service addresses. Okay, is that understandable? So what would be a typical question for that? So for instance, for a financial planner who works mostly with we'll say divorced women or middle-aged women, maybe even widowed, and they're looking to re-enter the workplace. So the question might be, do you know how when women get divorced or re-enter the workforce after many years of depending on a spouse, they're overwhelmed by all the financial decisions they have to make? Makes sense, right? From a standpoint of my business, from a coaching standpoint, there's several ways I can go. Do you know that that small business owners between the growth years of 3 to 5 or fail at a 87% rate? Actually, that number may have changed a little bit, but that's close. Unfortunately, it really is. That's a scary number that you've been in business 3 to 5 years and still there's an 87% chance that you fail. So the second part of the formula describes your service beginning with the words, what I do or what we do. So to follow up on the financial planner, what I do is help women gain control of their finances and achieve their personal financial and investment goals. From my coaching standpoint, what I might say is what I do is work with small business owners to help them resolve outstanding issues and get to that next level and becoming more financially successful. Very similar thought process there. And the third part, explain why your product or services is valuable by describing the benefit it delivers, beginning with the word so that. So if I write the whole thing together, it would something, well, from the financial planning standpoint, it would something like, do you know how when women get divorced or re-enter the workforce, after many years of depending on a spouse, they're overwhelmed by all the financial decisions they have to make? What we do is help women gain control of their finances and achieve their personal financial and investment goals so that they can stay in the house they've lived in most of their lives, have enough income to enjoy a comfortable lifestyle, and be free of money worries. I would restate that slightly a little bit from a small business owner, a lot of it on the same instance, because the end result is that my goal is to get them to the next level, to help them become more financially successful. So that's and the key is that you have to break it into three parts, like Mr. Bly said, and that you write it out, and then and it's a constant refining. I'm gonna say you're gonna write something out. You may not like it. Check with your spouse, your significant other, your best friend down the street, maybe your kids. All right, your older kids, not your younger kids. And see how they feel about it. And then of course test it on some of your friends. Test it at a networking meeting. You have to write it out. You have to memorize it. You can't stand up and read it. And it also has to sound like you've memorized it, or at least it's got to flow, so it's got to sound natural, not that it's just memorized. And it should also in line with your mission and vision. It's extremely important that everything you do toward your elevator speech is in line with your mission and vision. Because if not, you're going to be at odds. First of all, you're going to be at odds with yourself, and your message will not come across clear, and it will sound that way. I go to networking meetings, and I hear people that stand up and have no idea what they're going to say before they even stand up. They haven't even thought about it. They come to these meetings. Well, you know why you're at this meeting. You're at this meeting to promote your business and to get more business, to find clients. So we'll talk about this a little bit more. You're listening to the Elliot Jolesch Hour. I am Elliot Jolesch. You're listening on OMTimes Radio. And we'll be back right after these messages.
This is OTR-FM, part of the IOM radio network.
OMTimes Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Hello, I'm Sandy Sedgbeer, host of the Inspired Parenting radio show, where every week we bring you empowering information from the diverse fields of conscious parenting, education, neuroscience, consciousness, health, and metaphysics to support you in nurturing the best in your children. So if you're interested in understanding what shapes your children's minds, spirits, and hearts, join me every Thursday at 4 p.m. Pacific Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, and prepare to be inspired.
Circle of Hearts Radio is a sanctuary on the airwaves. Join me, Grandmother Elia, in the circle on Sunday, 2 p.m. Eastern, as I share information to both enlighten and nourish your soul.
Host your show on IOM FM, the radio network of OMTimes Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of OMTimes. Hosting a show on IOM FM immediately connects you with our extensive dedicated community.
This is OTR-FM, part of the IOM radio network.
Welcome back. You're listening to Elliot Jolesch on the Elliot Jolesch Hour. I am the business therapist, and for the last 45 minutes or so, we've been talking about setting goals, the fact there's only 44 days left in the year. We talked a little bit about goal setting, about making sure you're on the right track, how to set your goals for next year. In the last segment here, we were talking about elevator speeches and being consistent with your elevator speech and practicing your elevator speech. You should get out there, stand up, if you put it on cards to begin with, till you memorize it. And then once you've memorized it, you've got to make it sound like it's not memorized. I know that sounds funny, doesn't it? But it's got to be natural. Maybe make a gimmick out of it. I go to my Frisco chamber here in town, which is a great chamber, one of the best I've been involved with. And we have ideally 75 to 100 people every meeting. We meet once a week. And it's always interesting. I'm going to say, of the 100 or so people that show up every week, I'm going to say 15, maybe 20 people have a well-developed elevator speech and a shtick to go with it in some respects. We've got a couple of guys. We've got one guy that always brings an instrument, usually an out-of-tune instrument, and sings a little ditty. Now, the ditty will be a little bit different, but it's basically very similar. Most of the wording is almost identical each time. But I've got another guy a printing guy, that after he kind of picked up his own thing. He had been called once. He was relatively new. I don't think it was his first meeting, but he'd been relatively new, and everybody else, a lot of other people had gone ahead of him. And we had somebody that come out and sing. We had somebody that danced. We had somebody that played music. And he gets up there and he introduces himself and he says, "I don't sing, I don't dance, I just print." He's a printer. And he went on and proceeded in the next 20 seconds or so to explain what he does and the type of printing he does. And that was it. And that stuck. And he's used it ever since. And if you meet him right now, if somebody walks up to him and says, "You're the print guy, right?" And we have more than one printer in there, but this guy, he came up with a kind of a little ditty and an elevator speech that worked for him. We have another printer in there that kind of does a little like a sideline cheer, a football cheer, and it works. In fact, they just installed a brand new printer and are able to do some new types of jobs. So then because of that, she wrote a special 30-second elevator speech to talk about the new printer and some of the new services they offered. And she stretched that out to almost 90 days because it took about that long for them to get it installed, get it running. And now it's operational. And they said, and it gives them some whole new features. And she talked about how much faster jobs were, all something that she could work into a 30-second presentation. So there's plenty of opportunity there. You have to sit down and figure out, what can I talk about? What is my ideal situation? What am I looking for maybe? What can I do that other people can't do, or what do I do better than other people can do? And it doesn't matter how many. I mean, we've got in this group, we've got 20 life insurance people. I think so, maybe 15, from all different walks of life. We've got 2 or 3 that are from the same company. And in fact, our MC, the guy that kind of hosts us, that makes all the announcements or calls everybody's card out, business card out, and gets them to stand up. He's a good friend and an insurance agent. And at the very end, he says, "I'm blankety blank with blank insurance company, and there's a lot of us in the room, and whether you see me or anybody else doesn't matter. Just see somebody to make sure that you're appropriately taken care of, because life changes in an instant." And he's so right. It's very important. And I kind of digress here slightly that it's important to make sure you have kind of all your eggs lined up in the right basket, so that you have health insurance if appropriate. You have life insurance to take care of yourself and your family. Because my question would be to you is, particularly if you're a sole entrepreneur, and even more important if you're a business owner and you have employees that count on you, what happens to you? If something happens to you, what happens to the business? And again, if there's anybody that's that important in your business, what happens if something happens to them? What happens to your business? That's the reason why I always suggest Keyman Insurance, but I also suggest that you talk to an expert. They'll be able to sit down and figure out what's the right thing for you. That's what they've been studying years for, to figure out what's right. And if you don't like the first guy you talk to, go find a second guy to talk to. You don't have to talk to the first guy and assume that that's the only one that's out there. It's in any business, just like when I talk about insurance, I talk about accounting. Go interview several accountants. Find out what makes them better than the next person. Are they more familiar with QuickBooks if that's something you use? Are they more familiar with certain tax practices because a lot of their clients are small business owners? If you go to a CPA and all his clients are widowed women, and he deals a lot in estates, I'm not sure that's the appropriate person for a small business owner. Not yet, at least. So, but on the other side, you go in and talk to an accountant that does a lot of audits, and he does, and a lot of the businesses he works with have hundreds or thousands of employees. Same thing. On the other end, might not be an appropriate fit for you. So those are all things you have to kind of look at when you kind of decide. And the end of the year, beginning of the new year is always a good time to kind of review. Here's what I've got. One of the things we'll talk about in the weeks to come is kind of a reporting structure. There was an article in entrepreneur.com today, and I haven't had a chance to really dig deep into it, but I liked the message that it was delivering. I think it's a very appropriate message for a small business owner, and it will be we'll discuss it in great detail in the weeks to come. Whether I do it next week or the week after, I don't know yet. I'm lining up some guests for the next few weeks, but I've got to get commitments from them first before I can figure out where do I what do I talk about and what my schedule of topics will be. But making sure that you understand for the next several weeks, one of the things we will always talk about is how many days are left in the year and where your goals are for this year. Are you going to meet your goals? And more importantly, have you set your goals for next year? And when I'm talking about setting goals, as we end the show here, I'm talking about writing them down. Put them up on a bulletin board in your office so that you can see them every day. Keep records. If your estimation is to sign 50 new clients this coming year, how many people do you need to talk to? What's your close rate? So for every so you have a 20% close rate. So for every 5 people you talk to, you close 1 person. So that means if you're going to close 50 people, how many people do you need to talk to? And now break that down to monthly, quarterly, weekly, whatever time frames you want to do. How many times does it take how many times do you have to talk to that person before they become a client? If you talk to them one time and they're ready to go, sign them up, move forward, great. But in my expertise, in most cases, you have to talk to a client or a prospect, they're not a client yet, a prospect, probably a minimum of 3 if you're lucky, usually 5 to 7 times. I know there's been some research done over the years on how many times it takes to talk to a suspect A or prospect before they become a customer. And surprisingly enough, it is typically about 7 times. And how many times do you really go after somebody? I know a lot of people, they'll go talk to one person. No, we're not interested. Okay, thank you. And move on. And you shouldn't do that. Put them on a list. Put on a list to hit back them 15, 30 days later. Or put them on a list, convince them to sign up for some type of email notifications about some of your products. Put them on a drip campaign. We'll talk about that in future weeks to come. I get an expert on marketing to come in and talk with me. And more expert than I am. I'm doing a lot with marketing right now. I've learned a lot in the last year and improved my skill set. I'm always on that base of improving my skill set of looking at education. I stress that upon my clients, and I would stress that if you're listening to me. Find out something you're not familiar with that you want to get better at and learn it. Find people that can help you, that can coach you to become better at a skill set you're not familiar with. Because we live in an ever-changing world, and you've got to keep your skill sets up to date and even get them better at some things or something that you're not familiar with. It's a good time to review your website. Go back into your website and see, is my website doing what I expect it to do? And if the answer is no, then what do I need to do differently? If I ask you, do you have a landing page, and you don't know what a landing page is, it's time to find out what a landing page is. It's a very important tool in marketing. You have to have it. Do you advertise or promote yourself on Facebook? If not, why not? Maybe there's a good reason why not to. I know some businesses have a situation where they can't from a centralized or control standpoint, that you can't promote yourself, and that's understandable. But if you're in a business where you can promote yourself, or you're selling widgets, and maybe Facebook isn't the appropriate place for you because business people aren't going to see it, but don't convince yourself completely. Go look at some of the biggest businesses that have no necessary product line for most people on Facebook. From a corporate standpoint, you'll find them on Facebook in some way, shape, or form. Go look at LinkedIn. LinkedIn's another good example where you can be used for attracting new clients. Create videos, put them out on YouTube or even on Facebook. Videos these days with your phone, or even with, you don't have to have a fantastic camera. So it's been another wonderful hour here. I want to thank you all for joining me. I look forward to talking to you all next week. We are going to try to have a guest next week, get all the scheduling set up. You've been listening to the Elliot Jolesch Hour. I am Elliot Jolesch, the business therapist. Y'all have a great week, and we'll see you next week. Take care. Bye-bye for now.